yellow because why? How did you know that?
Because it's contained in the title.
That's right, because the title says violence against women. Right? So I'm done with what? Bob?
That's the title.
I'm done with title, so I go to what?
Purpose section.
I go to purpose. Right? And the purpose is application 2, right? So what's my conclusion for purpose? The injury, the what? The injury, Duran, what? If the first one was the injury the title indicated the legislature was intending to prevent is blank, then the second sentence should be the injury that the
Purpose section.
yes, the injury that the purpose section indicates the legislature intended to prevent is purpose section says we want to put an end to domestic abuse. So what is the injury? Or at least injury to her could be domestic abuse, or could just be, it could be abuse, right? Is abuse, right? Next word, because what?
Purpose section.
That's right, because the purpose section says the legislature intends to prevent what? And there's a reason I'm hesitating to use the word domestic here. Why am I hesitating to use domestic here? Where am I going to use it? Duran, where am I going to use it?
Domestic abuse.
Where am I going to use domestic? I'll use abuse here, I don't mind that. Where am I going to use domestic? First element is the kind of injury. Pardon?
How it happens.
Exactly, right? Exactly. Right? Domestic doesn't affect the injury that I suffered, right? It does affect how it happened, right? Maybe splitting hairs there, but just so I make it perhaps hopefully less confusing. The legislature intends to prevent abuse. I'm done now with purpose section. Where do I go? I've done title, I've done purpose, now I go to plain meaning. Okay, same dynamic. The injury that the injury that the what? I'd let you guys do it because I messed up. The injury that what? Rob, what?
Plain meaning.
That's right. The injury that the plain meaning of the what? Of the surrounding sections? Of this section of the statute. Of this section of the statute indicates what?
The legislative intent.
That's right. Indicates the legislature was intending to prevent is That's right. That's exactly right. Is physical harm. Next word.
Because.
Because it says. Now, remember what we did last time, right? Last time we had every piece of evidence was pointing to the same thing. It was women, right? So then we just wrapped this up by showing that she was a member of that class by saying the plaintiff is a woman because, okay? But there's something kind of funny going on here. The first two say the first kind of injury, the one we got from the title, was what? Violence, right? The one we got from the purpose section was abuse. Okay? Consistent, inconsistent. Those are pretty, I'm thinking those are pretty close. I can look, I mean, any kind of violence, any kind of abuse, that works. But now we get to the third one, and the third one says the plain meaning is that they're just trying to prevent physical harm. Is that consistent or inconsistent with what we saw in the first two?
Inconsistent.
It's inconsistent, right? It's what? Broader or narrower?
It's more narrow.
It's more narrow. Huh. Right? Now, is this a problem? It's a problem depending on the what? It's a problem depending on the what? What am I trying to figure out? Caitlin, what am I trying to figure out? Not yet. I'm still trying to I'm trying to figure out if the statute can be used to prove duty and breach in a case. And the question I'm trying to answer to prove that is this the what?
Kind of.
That's right. Is this the kind of harm the legislature was intended to prevent? So long as my harm is what?
Physical.
So long as my harm is physical, I don't care about the difference between the first two and the third thing I looked at. Because they all allow me to say, yeah, this is the right kind of harm. But if she suffers emotional harm, if she suffered harm to her property, right, then I'm going to have to stop here and I'm going to have to figure out, do I follow the intent I'm getting from the plain meaning, or do I follow the intent that I'm getting from the title and the purpose, the broader one? Okay? Is there a right answer to that? No. Right? There isn't. Right? Got some evidence that goes to one injury, got some evidence that goes to a little slightly different injury. Whatever you say is fine with me, so long as you resolve that tension. Right? Got some evidence that says this, I got some evidence that says that. Here's why I'm going to go with the title and the purpose section. Because there's two pieces of evidence there and there's only one to the other side. Or I'm going to go to the plain meaning because that's what the statute is actually dealing with. Okay, that's fine too. Okay? Once you figure out the kind of injury you're trying to prevent, the last step you've got to show is what?
Kind of circumstances.
Not yet. We're not done with kind of injury yet before we go to kind of circumstances. All I've shown is that the legislature was trying to prevent this kind of injury.
We have to show them that the injury was...
That her injury was that kind of injury. So our last sentence would be, she suffered a physical injury because. Or she suffered from violence and abuse because. Right? And then once we have, so there's really two things going on. First one is, what is the legislature trying to do? Does what we have, second part is, what we have, does it fit into that? And then we can go to the next question, right? right? Now we can go to the circumstance. Does that make sense? Does everybody see how this is all going to ultimately fit together? Now, the other thing is I understand that as the exam gets closer, the amount of interaction that you have with these concepts, you hunger for that to increase, perhaps even exponentially. So you're saying, I would love to have the opportunity to do this, even, Professor, when I am not in your presence. Right? And because I try and fulfill your sincerest dreams, Duran, you're looking skeptical. You don't think, now you're looking at me. Okay. Not for a minute that you doubted me. Okay, so I brought you last year's exam problem on negligence, right? And so alternatively, we'll probably take a look at this, some in class, maybe some in the review sessions, but just so you have this, and you can start looking at it and playing around with it. So I can assure you, review sessions that drift into class time, we'll be looking at some of the negligence causes of action. There's actually 2 causes of action and contributory negligence floating around in the problem, right? And so certainly on Thursdays before class, we'll look at that, and probably we'll take some class time to look at that stuff as well. So, let me see. Yes.
Will you also be handing out one for strict liability?
I think I already gave you one for strict liability. Didn't I give you the
demolition one?
The demolition. Yeah, that was strict last year's strict liability problem was the one I gave you. Did you need that, Lisa, or do you have that?
No, I have it, but I didn't know if you were giving us something fresh, like something that we would take off
just
on.
Stale.
The stale old one.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you I think I told you last semester my theory on exam thing. And again, everybody has different issues with taking exams in terms of what you need to work on. If you feel as though you are having, because I don't give you a lot of problems to pick the facts out, if you feel like you're having problems picking out relevant facts, one place to start is just the cases in the book, because normally they only talk about like one issue or something. See if you can figure out how the facts from the cases would fit into the rules that you have in terms of strict liability or negligence. If it's missing a fact that you need, just make it up. What's the fact that you would like to have? Right? Oh gosh, I don't know whether this child has exceptional abilities. Then I'll just give those to them. Right? How would I write the answer then if they had the exceptional abilities or whatever? I tend to err, again, I think I mentioned this last semester, but I tend to err on just giving you a single problem really for 2 reasons. I mean, the first reason is structurally, if you can answer one, you can answer any of them. Again, that doesn't address the picking out the facts part, but it does address just getting your answer. The other dynamic is I know that when I was in law school, the temptation for me when I got multiple problems, that meant I would read them I would issue spot in them, but that's how I would fill my time. Okay, let me read this one. Yeah, I see this, I see this, I see this, I see this. Okay, I'm good with that. I see everything, right? Then next problem. Okay, I see this, I see this, I see this, I see this, I see this. Got it, this is great, I see everything, right? And the challenge a lot of time is, how do I put this together in a limited amount of time? If I have a whole bunch of problems, I don't have to make myself do that, because I can feel I'm being productive by reading a lot of problems. What I want you to do is to sit down and start writing and rewriting a problem, right? So that when you walk into that room, you know exactly what you want to do, and you know exactly how long each section is going to take you. Right? And then that way you can make good choices about how you want to spend your time. Okay. All right. So the last time we were together, we were doing res ipsa loquitur. Did I give you that case? Did we talk about, last semester, I forget, last semester, did we talk about altered states of consciousness and stereochemistry and tetrahedrons? We did. I thought so, right? Just to refresh, because one of the things that I find is really, really valuable, and probably something that we should have alluded to before you were writing your appellate, whatever it is that you're writing, as opposed to now that we've like almost done it or whatever. But one of the things that I find to be very, very valuable as a tool, as a lawyer, is the ability to look at the same situation from different perspectives. Right? You know, is this a store? For example, I recently was talking to somebody about a case they're working on. Is this a story about? It was a criminal case about domestic terrorism. Is this a story about the suffering that members of the military had because this guy was posting horrible things on the internet about attacking military personnel, right? Or is this a story about, right, and who's the star of the story about how the military personnel are suffering because this guy's posting all this terrible stuff? Who do we identify with in that story? Military personnel, that's right. Right? To the extent that, see, and the other story was, is this a story about a kid who was pulled out of school when he was in the 3rd grade, and over the next 10 years only progressed 4 years of school? Right? Parents pull him out, we're going to homeschool him, and he hasn't been out of his house in the next 10 years at all, and he's only advanced 4 years of school, and nobody has caught this. And as a result of that, there's a whole bunch of issues coming up. Same story, right? It's two different stories about the same life, right? And as a lawyer, you got to look at that package of information, and you got to figure out what stories are there, right? Because you got to put together your client's story for the court, right? Similarly, there can be lots of legal issues in a case, right? Morrison, right? Morrison, what's the legal issue that's going on here? What's my priority? Lowest standard of care, right? As the plaintiff, I want to get the lowest standard of care. This is a case about standard of care, right? But then you look at that case from a different perspective. You turn the tetrahedron in a different way, and all of a sudden it goes, no, this is a case about getting the standard of care that will allow me to get an expert in the courtroom. So how does this case look when I'm trying to get an expert in the courtroom? What do I need to argue to make that happen? Right? So that dynamic of seeing things from different perspectives, incredibly, incredibly important as a lawyer. And, you know, I'm sure that they told you, the statement of the case is supposed to be what? When you write your statement of the case for your trial brief or your appellate brief, it's supposed to be what? It's supposed to be persuasive, right? How do you make it persuasive? You lie and you exaggerate. Right? I mean, isn't that what you do? And then they tell you what? You're not allowed to lie and you're not allowed to exaggerate. Well, then how can you make it persuasive? Right? Everybody got the same facts. It's just a story. It's a story with the same facts. No, it's not. What makes your story persuasive is given that body of facts, all of which have to be used, right? Plaintiff and defendant, at the end of the day, are going to pretty much use the same facts, but it's what story do you use those facts to tell? You know, do you tell the story of the kid who's constantly posting things on the internet, who that put military personnel at risk, or do you tell the story about the kid who's basically locked in a closet with a cell phone and nothing to do? Right? Same events are going to be in both stories, but they are two different stories. Okay? And that's how you make the statement of the case persuasive. You don't lie, you don't exaggerate. You figure out what your client's story is amongst those facts, and you figure out how to put the facts back together to tell that story. Okay, so anyway, last time we were together, we were talking Ibarra and res ipsa loquitur. Okay. So, res ipsa loquitur is what? Res ipsa loquitur is what? It's a way of proving what? It's a way of proving what? Lisa, it's a way of proving what?
It creates the presumption of duty, breach, and cause, and the burden of proof falls on the defendant, not the plaintiff, to show that they did not breach the duty of care.
That's exactly right. Now, why do we need that? Why do we need yet another way of proving duty and breach? Or in this case, duty, breach, and cause. Right? And the reason that we need another mechanism for proving duty and breach is because I don't like you and I want to give you all more to memorize. Right? Lisa, is that the right answer?
No.
Maybe partially the right answer, but go ahead.
Because you'll have situations like we had in Ybarra where the plaintiff was incapacitated in some way. He was unconscious when the injury happened, so he could not testify as to what happened.
And so we use res ipsa loquitur to prove duty and breach, or duty, breach, and cause, right? More completely, duty, breach, and cause. We use res ipsa loquitur to prove duty, breach, and cause in situations, Lisa, when what?
The plaintiff
Cannot what?
cannot witness.
That's right. When the plaintiff doesn't know, can't prove what happened. Right? So if we look at the situation and we go, I don't know what the defendant did. I have no idea how the plaintiff got hurt. I just know what hurt him. Sort of. Right? We talked about that. The classic example is the barrel coming out of the window. I know he got hurt by a barrel. I have no idea how it got out the window. I had some friends in college. They were actually older than I was, and they went to a meeting at a hotel. I missed this experience, right? And while they were at this meeting at this hotel, they happened to come across a very large window and a piano. And they began to speculate as to whether the piano would fit through the window. And what they found out was indeed the piano would fit through the window, and once they found that out, it was too late to keep it inside. Glad I missed that one. Okay, so anyway, res ipsa loquitur, you're walking along the side of the road, and all of a sudden you're struck by a piano coming out of the second floor window, right? Res ipsa loquitur, that's the situation. Plaintiff does not know, can't prove how this thing that hurt him hurt him. I don't know how this instrumentality came to hurt me, but I know that it did, right? Can't use negligence per se, because I don't know what the behavior was. If I don't know what the behavior was, I can't show the violation of statute. Same thing with the hand test. I can't tell you what behavior needs to be changed because I don't know what behavior led to the accident. Right? So we have res ipsa loquitur when we don't know how the accident took place. We have negligence per se when we do know how it took place, and we have a statute that the defendant may have violated. And when we don't have a statute but we know what happened, then we can use the hand test, burden, probability, and loss. Okay. So we're in our outline. We're under duty. This is our third way of proving it. In order to use res ipsa loquitur, right? In order to use res ipsa loquitur, we can't always use it. We're going to try and use it. We're going to try and use it when the plaintiff doesn't know what happened. But if we're in that situation before we can use this doctrine, we got to prove three things. What are the three things we have to prove? Kelly, what's one of the things that we have to prove?
That the plaintiff's injury was not due to the plaintiff's voluntary action.
Okay, plaintiff's injury not due to plaintiff's voluntary action. Okay, which not only is one of the elements for res ipsa loquitur, but if that's true, it probably also eliminates the possibility that we're going to have contributory negligence as an affirmative defense. Okay? Second, what is our second? Joe, what's our second element?
The accident is one which does not usually occur without negligence.
Okay, accident is one that ordinarily does not occur unless someone is negligent, right? Barrel just doesn't happen to come out of a window and crash to the sidewalk unless somebody was there and somebody breached a duty of care. Piano doesn't just happen to come out of a window and crush somebody on the sidewalk unless somebody breached a duty of care. Okay? Third, what's the third factor? Crystal, what's the third factor?
Are these notes from last class?
Pardon?
Are these notes from last class?
And I take it you're about to tell me that you weren't here the last class.
That is correct.
That is
Not
correct. Michael, give me the third one.
Plaintiff's injuries must have been caused by an instrumentality under defendant's control.
Okay, plaintiff's injury must have been caused by an instrumentality under the defendant's control. Right? So, amongst the things that have to be proven here or identified here are one, the instrumentality, right? And then you're going to have to show that that instrumentality caused the injury. So first, what was the instrumentality? How did it cause the injury? And then finally, was instrumentality under defendant's control. And you'll notice I did not write on the board instrumentality caused injury. The reason I didn't write that is not because that's not something you don't have to show. You have to show that. But these are the two that become problematic in Ibarra. Right? This is where the problem comes up in Ibarra. Right? The classic example of the instrumentality thing is the barrel comes out the window and it hits me. What is the instrumentality that caused my injury? Olivia, what's the instrumentality that caused my injury?
The barrel.
The barrel. Right? I'm walking down the sidewalk. I get hit by a piano. What is the instrumentality that caused my injury? The piano. Okay? I think we said last time, what was the instrumentality that caused Mr. Ibarra's shoulder injury?
Nobody really knows.
Nobody knows. We don't know what the instrumentality was. And yet, Olivia, and yet, we still apply res ipsa loquitur. How does the court get around that problem?
I think they say somewhere that it's because he's unconscious, all of the defendants who had any instrumentality, which might have caused his injuries.
Instead of, we'll get to that in a minute, right? We'll get to that in a minute. What is it that they all did have control over?
His body.
That's right. Right? We don't know what the instrumentality was, but we know that they had control over his body. And that's enough. Right? So in the rule, plaintiff's body can meet the instrumentality requirement. Right? I don't have to show that the defendant had control over some instrumentality if I can show that the defendant had control over the plaintiff's body. Right? So that's one rule, one holding that comes out of this case. Okay? Now, the other one, Olivia, is the one that you're alluding to. What is the defendant's response? What is the defendant anesthesiologist's defense when they say, okay, the plaintiff's body was under your control? Element met. Defendant's body was under your control. Element met. What is the defendant doctor anesthesiologist response to that? Can't deny it, right? At some point I was jamming a needle into his arm, I was filling him up with anesthesia. Can't say that I didn't have him under my control.
Because there's so many different people that had control over
That's exactly right. So the defendant's argument, Olivia, is what? When this says control, what it means is what?
like complete control.
Exactly. It means complete or exclusive control. That's the defendant's argument. That's what it really means, is I've got to have complete or exclusive control. If this doctrine is going to apply to me, I didn't. Right? If I'm the only one who has control, then you know, right? And this is the purpose, the origin of res ipsa loquitur. If I'm the only one who had the barrel, or if I'm the only one who had the body, then, Adrian, we know that more likely than not, the screw-up was whose? That's exactly right. When I'm the only one who's supposed to have the barrel, or I'm the only one who's supposed to have the body, then if something goes wrong, it must be on me. And we're going to presume that unless I can prove otherwise. But the defendant says, wait a minute, that doesn't apply here. Because you got 7, 8, 9 people running around in there, maybe more than that. They all had control. In fact, odds are that I wasn't the problem. Given the number of people in that room, odds are I wasn't the problem. So why are you shifting the burden on me? How can you do that? That's not fair. That's not appropriate. Olivia, what is the court's response to that?
That everyone that had control over his body would be.
Why is that enough? Why is it enough? Why are you shifting the burden on me when the odds of me being the problem are like 1 in 9?
Because if you can't say that it's one person, you can't say that it was any of them.
So what?
Well, then the
Stop, and everybody make sure that you're on board with what Olivia just said, right? If I let one out, I gotta let everybody out, right? If I buy the 1 in 9 argument from one of them, I gotta buy the 1 in 9 argument from all of them, and then everybody's out. And Olivia, if everybody's out, who bears the cost of that injury? The plaintiff. So what's wrong with that?
It's really not fair.
Why not? What does fair mean? Why don't you think it's fair? Why didn't the court think it was fair?
Because he suffered an injury and he should be able to recover for that injury.
But why from me? Because I'm a what and he's a what? Olivia, he is what? Relative to me, he is what in his injury?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
You're the one who said it wasn't fair. Why don't you think it's fair that even though I'm only maybe potentially 1/9 of the problem, he's what percent of the problem? Plaintiff is what percent of the problem here?
He's either all of the problem or none of the problem.
Which?
I'm not sure which way you're going with
Oh, don't worry about which way I'm going with this. We already know this. Step 1. What's step 1?
Okay, so he's none of the problem.
He's none of the problem. He is what in this situation? What does the court call him? Starts with an I.
Innocent.
He's innocent. And every one of those other people is a what? A wrongdoer. Why? Only one of them screwed up, or only 2 of them screwed up. Why is every one of them a wrongdoer?
they were all bound to make sure that no harm came to him at all.
Maybe they fulfilled that responsibility. Maybe why is that
Because
significant?
they're a team and they all have to make sure that all of their coworkers.
So therefore, why are they responsible for making sure what their coworkers do rather than him making sure what their coworkers do?
Well, he's unconscious.
Oh, he is. And they are what?
Conscious.
And if they're conscious, they must have their what open?
Eyes.
Oh. And if they have their eyes open,
They should see what's happening.
that's right. So they're a wrongdoer either because they screwed up Olivia or because they're not what?
Preventing someone else from screwing up?
Or if they missed the opportunity to stop them, at least they what?
Didn't tell anyone?
That's exactly right. Right? Not only is there somebody in that room who screwed up, but there are other people in that room who may know who screwed up and they're not saying. Right? This case, Ibarra, this problem, right, the court's value here, the court's value in coming to the conclusion that this doesn't have to be exclusive control. What the court says here is so long as you have exclusive control amongst all the defendants, everybody who had access to him is in the case. If we didn't have that, that would be different. If some of the defendants were missing from the case, they couldn't find them, they couldn't identify them, whatever. If the wrongdoer might have been completely out of this case, that would be different. I'm not saying that we wouldn't use res ipsa or would, but that would be a different case. We're dealing with a situation where let me change it, where anybody who could have been the problem is one of the defendants. Somebody amongst these 9, it's like an Agatha Christie novel, right? 10 Little Indians or something. One of the people in that room is the murderer, right? And we're gonna get them, right? We're either gonna get them to confess, or we're gonna get one of the other people to call them out, right? Between an innocent and a wrongdoer. Between an innocent and a wrongdoer, Lisa, who should bear the cost of liability? The wrongdoer. All of you other defendants, you are all wrongdoers, either because you're not fessing up or because you're not tattling. He's innocent, right? So I'm going to put the squeeze on you. You either tell us who was the problem, or you prove yourself out, or you're going to write a check. Right? Ibarra comes down to my 8th grade science class. Right? Experience that I had in my 8th grade science class. Right? This is wonderful. In 8th grade, you always had, in my school, 8th grade, you took an IQ test. Right? And we had a room, we had a class, right? And it was, I forget what it was labeled, but it had a horrible label. But it was basically, I think the school called it socially maladjusted. And something horrible like that. I mean, think about growing up with that one, right? But anyway, they had a room and they labeled it socially maladjusted, and they give the IQ test for the whole school, right? And one of the kids in the socially maladjusted room blows the doors off the IQ test. Just does great. And they suddenly realize that this kid has hope. They are wasting his life in the socially maladjusted room. And then, so the second conclusion they came to was, we will put, this is fascinating that you never do this, I don't think they do this today, but anyway, they actually ranked our room, like all of the quote unquote smartest kids were in one room, and then the second smartest kids were in another room, and then the third smartest kids were in another room, all the way down to socially maladjusted, and they numbered these rooms, these sections, sequentially. And then they leaked out what was the highest section. So you could determine your 7th, 8th grade future by knowing your section number. Okay? So anyway, they decided that they were gonna take the socially maladjusted kid and they're gonna put him in the highest section. And the positive influence that all of us are gonna create is gonna save this kid and allow him to fulfill his potential as a human being. Okay, so you all know how this turns out, right? They take this kid and they put him in our room, and within 3 days, he has done what? He has corrupted every kid in our room, right? He's dating like 4 girls in our class. He's just like, you know, behavior's never been worse, right? This kid, he is the dominant personality of the room. So one day, but they continue with the experiment. So one day we're getting close to the end of science class, which is our last period, and poor Mr. Werner is writing up on the board. And as he's writing up on the board, right next to Mr. Werner's head is suddenly a spitball on the blackboard, right? So Mr. Werner spins around and he says, "Who did it?" Well, we all know who did it because we're sitting in the room, right? Looking at him, right? But we also knew that if we told, we would be dead, right? So we all just sit there quietly, right? So what does Mr. Werner say? Mr. Werner says, nobody's leaving until, that's right, until I know who did it, nobody leaves this room. 3 o'clock came, 3:30, 4 o'clock, right? Becomes obvious that all of us fear him even more than we fear Mr. Werner, right? So they bring the principal down and he stares at us, Mr. Werner stares at us, and we get to 4:30 and buses are gone and we're still sitting there, right? We're not leaving, right? And finally, what do they have to do? They have to let us go home because they don't want to stay there until midnight, right? And then the next day, they move that student out of the room back to his former class, and the rest is history, right? Same thing as a bar. That is exactly the same thing as a bar, right? I'm going to put the squeeze on all of you. I'm going to put the squeeze on all of you till one of you tells me, either because you feel bad that your cohorts are suffering, and so you indicate yourself, or somebody just points a finger at you. And interestingly enough, this case truly is like my 8th grade science class, because what happens when they remand the case? Pardon? Everybody gets found liable to run. Why? That's exactly, no different, right? Because if you're the one who talks, you lose your what? You lose your job, right? I mean, supposedly not, but nobody took that seriously. So, you know, again, exactly the same. But, you know, court was like, I'm fine with that, right? Because between, Lisa, between what 2 groups of people who should pay for liability? That's right, between a wrongdoer and an innocent, the wrongdoer must pay. And you're either a wrongdoer because you breached the duty, or you're a wrongdoer because, or you're a wrongdoer because you're not providing the plaintiff the evidence that he needs. Okay, now, notice that this is about, right, the problem here is that the defendants have access to evidence, the plaintiff does not have access to the evidence that he needs, and the defendants won't give it up. Right? So we're going to put pressure on the defendants to try and squeeze the evidence out of them. Okay? And that's the issue in the case, and we see this as a problem with duty, breach, and cause. Right? And we're going to call this the way Cardozo would see a negligence cause of action. Right? Because we take that problem and we see it as a duty and breach problem. Okay? Summers, and it's interesting because one of the cases that Summers cites, and the editors have edited this out of the case, in fact they took the cite out when they took the bar out of the case book. One of the cases that is cited in Summers is Ibarra. Okay? And what happens in Summers? I love this. What happens in Summers? April, what happened in Summers?
Plaintiff and defendant were on a hunting trip.
How many defendants? Two, right? So there's three people on a hunting trip, right? And what happens?
And the defendant shot. Well, they both fired simultaneously at the same thing. And the
Certainly that's what they're saying.
And the plaintiff died.
Okay, so somehow this hunting party gets separated. A quail comes up out of the grass. Supposedly two of them shoot. Okay, they both insist that they shot harmlessly, whatever. The plaintiff gets shot in the eye, and he tries to sue them, and he can't figure out who's the one who shot him. Okay? Now, do we actually know that both defendants were negligent? Duty and breach. April, you're shaking your head no. Why not?
We don't know the time. They said they both shot at the same time, but they don't know.
We don't know where they shot, we don't know when they shot, we don't know how they shot, right? It's possible that one of them may have been more responsible with their firing than the other. One of them may have actually waited to see or fired a different direction or whatever. This shows my ignorance. I used to think that hunting quail was fair. Right? I did. Because I thought when you went out and shot quail, you shot a bullet. Right? And so, because it just would be like a little bullet, and the quail had a fighting chance. You just had to like maneuver around this one bullet. And then, so it would be easy to figure out which one of them probably shot, you know. They don't do that. Bob, you're shaking your head. No, how do they hunt quail?
Use a shotgun and you have it scattered and get shot.
But you shoot at the little quail with a cloud of metal.
Yeah.
Right? This is not hard, right? You fill up 600 square feet and the quail never has a chance. Okay? But anyway, so this makes this theory a lot more difficult. But anyway, the idea is that the court begins by